Hello and welcome to the program, Tsula's Big Adventures with me, Tsula. This is Chapter 17, Part 2 of my complete video guide to becoming an amateur astronomer. Guide to the Constellations. Chapter 2, Constellations of Winter. In Chapter 17, Part 1, I went over a general discussion about constellations, and I also talked about the constellations of autumn. I have a correction to make about that. I said that the Hippocrene was an inspiration for poets, and it was mentioned in John Keats's famous poem, Ode to Autumn, which would have been nice because it was about the constellations of autumn, but I was wrong. John Keats mentioned the Hippocrene in his poem, Ode to a Nightingale. Now I've gotten that out of the way. If you want to go back and look at the episode on the constellations of autumn, here's the link to Part 1. In this, Part 2, I will be covering the constellations of winter. I'll start with the most obvious constellation of winter, and one that you probably recognize. If you walk outside on any winter night, there's going to be a very obvious constellation, and that is Orion the Hunter. So let's go outside and find Orion and see what else we can find by finding Orion and finding other constellations from there. And then I'll tell you about the constellations of winter. When you go outside to learn the constellations of winter, take a compass with you because we're going to face south to find Orion. Take your red headlamp and put on a lot of clothes because it's going to be cold and you're just going to be standing still basically. So wear a beanie and gloves and hand warmers and coat and warm socks and warm shoes. Let's go outside. So when you're trying to learn the constellations in winter, you go outside, you look in the sky, and you just can't make out a thing. It's just a jumble. Take your compass, point your compass south, and point your body south, and you're going to look up, and you're going to see a very obvious line of 3 stars in a row. And it's going to have a red star above it and a white star below it, and it's going to kind of look like a K. And that's Orion the Hunter. And that is Orion's belt. And above it will be an orangish, reddish star, pretty bright. And below it will be a pretty bright white star. And that whole thing that looks like a K is Orion the Hunter. If you go down from Orion's belt, it points to Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, in Canis Major. Go up from there and over, and that star is Procyon in Canis Minor. Hang on one second. In between Sirius and Procyon runs the winter Milky Way. It's a lot brighter if you go up and across to Cassiopeia, but the Milky Way does run right there. From Procyon, that star right there in Canis Minor, and you go up to these 2 stars, that's Castor and Pollux and Gemini. And below Gemini is the faint constellation on the zodiac, which is right here, and that is Cancer the Crab. And in Cancer the Crab is the famous beehive cluster. I just turned my ISO as high as it'll go, 104,000, if you can believe it, to see if you can see the Milky Way between Sirius and Procyon. That's the winter Milky Way. Of course, it's not nearly as bright as the summer Milky Way, but it's beautiful nevertheless. Okay, I have to go inside so I don't die. Below Rigel, the bright white star in Orion, is a faint constellation, Lepus. the Hare. And in between Procyon and Canis Minor and Sirius, the brightest star of the night sky, and Canis Major, is Monoceros, the unicorn. It's a faint constellation. Directly to the right of Rigel is Eridanus, the river. Then going back to Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, and Canis Major, just below that is Puppis, low on the horizon. But I'll tell you more about it later. Now let's go back inside and warm up. Orion is probably the best known constellation in the sky. Few other constellations in the sky look so much like their name or have so many bright stars. Orion dominates the winter sky. Orion has been recognized as a distinct group of stars for thousands of years. The astronomers of Mesopotamia, who were called the Chaldeans, knew these stars as Tammuz, the god of fertility and new life in nature. The Syrians called this group of stars Al-Jabbar, the giant. The ancient Egyptians called them Sahu, soul of Osiris. In Greek mythology, Orion was a great hunter, and he has a sword, and there are multiple versions of the story of Orion's birth and death. In one version, Orion is the son of Poseidon, and he can walk on water. And in one story, Orion swam to Crete, an island, where he hunted with Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. And he boasted that he could kill anything which came to Earth. And Gaia, the personification of Earth, objected and had Orion killed by a scorpion. In another version of this story, Artemis fell in love with Orion, and her twin brother Apollo disapproved of this, and he challenged Artemis to hit a distant object that he saw swimming in the ocean that he knew was Orion. "You want me to hit that object in the ocean, Apollo?" "Very well then, you know my skill level." "I believe I hit it, Apollo. Let's go check the ocean." And Artemis shot an arrow at it, not realizing it was Orion, and she accidentally killed Orion. And when his body washed ashore and she saw what she had done, she became inconsolable. And to honor him, she placed Orion among the stars along with his hunting dogs. Orion is rich in celestial treasures. The bright red star that I mentioned that marks his shoulder is Betelgeuse. It's a red giant, and the word Betelgeuse is Arabic for house of twins because it's near the twins. And it's a variable star, varying from magnitude 0.3 to 1.2 over a period of 7 years. Also, Betelgeuse is the most likely candidate to explode in a supernova, possibly in our lifetime. That would be exciting. The bright white star at the base of Orion is his left foot, and it's named Rigel, Arabic for foot. And it's a supergiant, 1,400 light years away. It's 50,000 times more luminous than our sun. And of course, it contains the famous Great Orion Nebula, M42, one of the most spectacular objects in the night sky, easily visible in binoculars and even to the naked eye in a dark sky sight. It's spectacular in even a small telescope. The nebulosity spreads out from the core, and that has 4 stars in it called the trapezium, which power the nebula. Also above that is M43, a small patch of nebulosity just north of M42, and both are part of a gas cloud covering the constellation at a distance of 1,500 light years. Also, you can find the famous Horsehead Nebula, IC 434, also known as Barnard 33. It's a dark nebula next to the bright belt star Alnitak. It's difficult to see. It requires an 8-inch or larger telescope, and it would benefit from a O3 filter or one of those narrowband filters. This nebula was discovered by Scottish astronomer Wilhelmina Fleming in 1888 by studying glass plates. And you can also find IC 2118, the Witchhead Nebula, favorite among astrophotographers. There's also, at the top, M78, a reflection nebula that's part of the Orion molecular cloud complex. Below Orion is Canis Major, the Great Dog. Originally, Canis Major only referred to Sirius, the brightest star in the entire night sky, at magnitude -1.46. It's known as the dog star because it's thought to be responsible for the hot dog days of the end of summer. Sirius derives from the Greek word serios, meaning glowing or scorching. They thought that since it rose the same time as the sun in the summer, that it added warmth. The Egyptians associated Sirius with the annual flooding of the Nile River because it rose just before dawn in summer. Sirius has a companion star, a white dwarf. It's known as the Pup, and its magnitude 8.4, but it's difficult to see because of its proximity to Sirius, which is so bright. It was discovered by telescope maker Alvin Clark in 1862. Alvin Clark made several telescopes around the San Francisco Bay Area, including the one at the Lick Observatory on Mount Hamilton. There are many myths associated with Canis Major. According to the ancient Greeks, Canis Major could run incredibly fast and even won a race with the swifty fox. So Zeus honored him by placing the dog in the sky. In another myth, the Great Dog and the nearby constellation Canis Minor, the Little Dog, were Orion's hunting dogs, set to pounce on the constellation below them, Lepus, the hare or rabbit. In Canis Major, you'll find M41, a notable open cluster 4 degrees south of Sirius, so easy to find, visible to the naked eye at magnitude 6. And also you'll find NGC 2362, a cluster of dozens of stars around Tau Canis Majoris. The Little Dog is Canis Minor, and it can be easily found by its bright star, Procyon, which is Greek for before, because the Little Dog rises before Sirius, the big dog in Canis Major, and both are to the left of Orion. Canis Minor was one of Orion's hunting dogs, but also one legend has it that it was one of Actaeon's hounds. And Actaeon surprised Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, while she was bathing in a pond. And she was outraged that a mortal saw her naked, so she turned Actaeon into a stag, and she set a pack of hounds on him and had him devoured. So don't mess with Artemis the hunter. Canis Minor contains no notable deep sky objects, but Procyon, its brightest star, is the 14th brightest star in the night sky at magnitude 0.4. And it follows Orion across the sky in winter between Canis Major and Canis Minor, the hunting dogs. You'll find Monoceros, the unicorn. It's a faint constellation and a weird one. And it's on the celestial equator, which is helpful because when you're trying to calibrate your guide scope, you need to point it towards the celestial equator. It was named by German astronomer Jacob Barsch in 1624. Monoceros is from the Latin word for unicorn, or Greek for one-horned. The one-horned animal with a head and forequarters and horse and hindquarters of a stag and the tail of a lion can be traced back to the Assyrians, who lived from 2700 BC to 600 BC. It may have derived from a mistaken description of the rhinoceros. The beta star of Monoceros is magnitude 3.8, so not very bright, but it's actually a 4-star system. Monoceros contains a beautiful open cluster, M50. It's about a third of the way between Sirius and Procyon, so it's easy to find, and it's visible with binoculars. And in a telescope, it will reveal about 100 stars, some of them in pretty little arcs. Also in Monoceros is NGC 2244, a bright open cluster surrounded by the faint Rosette Nebula, visible in 10-inch or bigger telescopes, and maybe smaller ones on very clear nights under very dark skies. Rosette Nebula is also a favorite among astrophotographers. You'll also find NGC 2264, that's an open cluster known as the Christmas tree cluster. If you make a line from Rigel, the foot of Orion, through Betelgeuse, the red star that's his shoulder, it will point to Gemini, the twins. This is a familiar pattern in the sky in winter, and it's marked by the 2 brightest stars of Gemini, Castor and Pollux. Gemini is part of the zodiac, and it's been seen as twins by many cultures, either as men, gods, animals, or even plants. The Greeks named the stars Castor and Pollux after the twins who hatched from an egg from their mother Leda after she was seduced by Zeus while he was disguised as a swan. Sneaky little bastard. The twins were among the heroes who sailed with Jason and the Argonauts when they went to steal the Golden Fleece. The twins helped save the ship Argo from sinking during a storm, so the constellation was valued by sailors. William Herschel discovered Uranus in Gemini in 1781, and Clyde Tombaugh discovered the dwarf planet Pluto in Gemini in 1930. The brightest star of Gemini is Pollux, but it's called the beta star, Beta Geminorum. The second brightest star is Castor, which appears as a single star to the naked eye. But at magnitude 1.6, it's actually a sextuplet. A telescope will reveal 2 stars of magnitude 2 and 3, 2 arcseconds apart, with a 9th magnitude companion, and each of these 3 stars is also a double. In Gemini, you'll also find M35, a bright open cluster, beautiful in binoculars, and spectacular in a telescope. Also, you'll find NGC 2392, the Clown Face or Eskimo Nebula. It's an 8th magnitude planetary nebula that's kind of bluish-greenish. To the left of Gemini is the faint constellation Cancer, the Crab. It's a very faint constellation, but has a famous deep sky object, the beautiful Beehive Cluster. Cancer means crab in Latin, and Cancer, the constellation, is part of the zodiac. In Greek mythology, the crab pinched Hercules while he was fighting Hydra, and Hercules crushed the crab with his foot, and Hera, Hercules' stepmother and nemesis, rewarded the crab for its efforts by placing it in the sky. The sun used to cross Cancer on the summer solstice millennia ago, and that's why that line of latitude is called the Tropic of Cancer. But due to precession, the wobbling of the Earth on its own axis, the sun now crosses between Gemini and Taurus on the summer solstice. And you can also find a well-known multiple star in Cancer, Zeta Cancri. In a small telescope, this appears as 2 orangey stars. Also, there's M67, another open cluster, 15 arc seconds across, magnitude 7. From Cancer, which is on the ecliptic, drop down to the brightest star in the night sky, Sirius, to find 2 other constellations. Go down until you find the brightest star in the heavens, Sirius, well below Cancer, and from there You want to go south and you'll find Puppis, the stern of the ship Argo, the ship that Jason and the Argonauts used to steal Golden Fleece. The Milky Way runs alongside Puppis, and it's full of open clusters suitable for binoculars or small telescopes, including M46, a beautiful open cluster, a cloud of faint stars in a circle. There's also a faint planetary nebula, NGC 2438. It requires an 8-inch or larger telescope to see it. You can also find Zeta Puppis, a second magnitude blue supergiant and one of the largest in our galaxy, and also L2 Puppis. I don't know why it's called that. I think it's a long story I'm not going to go into. A very bright red variable star going from magnitude 2.6 to 6.2 over 5 months. In a telescope, it appears very red. And going back to the very bright star, Sirius, the dog star in Canis Major, to its right and below Orion, you will find the faint constellation Lepus, the hare or rabbit. Lepus is an ancient constellation, thought of as Orion's chair, or the Egyptians thought of it as a boat of Osiris. The Greeks called it a hare from the Greek lagus, and the Romans from the Latin word for hare. Lepus, far, far away from our galaxy's core, surprisingly contains an 8th magnitude globular cluster, M79, but you need an 8-inch or bigger telescope to resolve its stars. It also contains Gamma Leporis, a double star, 9 arcseconds apart and easy to separate, and R Leporis, also known as Hine's Crimson Star, named by British astronomer Russell Hine. It's a carbon star, it's very cool, and it's very red, varying in brightness from magnitude 6.8 to 10.5 and back over 432 days. It's most red when it's at its brightest. Above Lepus, you'll see the bright white star Rigel, the foot of Orion, and the long line of stars starting just above Rigel and running in a line down from there and curving around Lepus and then back again and down, down, down to below the northern hemisphere's horizon, where it ends at Achermar, which is Arabic for rivers in, is Eridanus, the river, Eridanus. This second longest constellation behind Hydra has been seen as a river since ancient times, usually as the Euphrates or the Nile. And in the second book of Metamorphosis, Ovid wrote of Phaethon being tossed out of the chariot of the sun to drown in the Eridanus. Eridanus contains a remarkable triple star, Omicron Eridani, consisting of a 4th magnitude orange dwarf, a 9th magnitude white dwarf, and an 11th magnitude red dwarf. The red and white dwarfs are 8 arcseconds apart, and the 3rd star is 80 arcseconds away. The white dwarf in this triple star system is the easiest white dwarf to see in the night sky, and it can be seen in a small telescope. And that's it for the Constellations of Winter. I hope you enjoyed it.